All right, we're gonna get started here. So thank you for joining today's webinar, the paradox of the female gamer. Thank you to the Fair Play Alliance for providing the forum here, and to all of you for your interest in today's content, of course. We're gonna have a lively discussion around what it means to be a female gamer in today's world, its evolution for the past couple of decades or so, and we'll try and anchor the discussion around people, policy, products, process, and personal anecdotes. A little housekeeping: questions will be collected and answered after the webinar in an email follow-up to the attendees. But with that, let's introduce our panelists today. So first up, we've got Matt Soeth, co-founder and executive director of I Can Help. I Can Help started when a student made a fake social media page about a teacher. The page gained over 1,000 followers and was the center of school drama for about 2 weeks. Finally, at the end of those 2 weeks, the student turned in the person who made the page, and it was taken down. I Can Help teaches teachers and students how to respond to negativity online. Matt joins our webinar to basically share tactical steps people can take to positively change toxic online gaming environments. Next up, we have Laura Higgins, Director of Community Safety and Digital Civility at Roblox. Laura is dedicated to helping Roblox players of all ages to have a fun and safe experience. She creates resources, tools that empower kids and parents to be confident in navigating the internet, working in partnership with safety organizations around the world to help make the online space a nicer place. And then we are still waiting on Brianna Wu, who should be joining us here shortly. She is a candidate for U.S. Congress. She's a software engineer, entrepreneur, game designer, and outspoken advocate for women's rights. She's one of the most prominent women in gaming technology, having founded her first startup at 19 years old. She's running for U.S. Congress. Brianna is also working to bring a new generation of voices and values to Washington, voices who understand technology and its impact on culture, society, and politics. And then, hi everyone, my name is Justin Davis. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spectrum Labs. I've spent the last maybe 16 years or so in helping building out dating and data and technology companies. So let's kick things off while we're waiting on Brianna to join.
I'm right here.
Oh, hi.
Hey.
You made it. Fantastic. So you made it just in time. But thanks for joining us.
Of course.
So we'll kick things off with a stat. I think that got this whole thing kind of started a couple months ago. We uncovered that about 70% of female gamers have pretended to be male to avoid harassment. We'll start with you, Laura, with an easy one here. Why do you think that is?
I mean, it's a very depressing stat. Probably not unsurprising, but sad nonetheless. I think there are a couple of things behind this, and maybe not all negative. So one is, unfortunately, we hear time after time that women are targeted online, treated differently. At best, they're kind of not seen as serious gamers. At worst, they are subject to serious harassment, sexual sort of threats, really misogynistic comments regularly, and quite frequently the kind of dogpiling behaviors as well. Historically, women in tech have had these issues. It's really sad that now is really affecting the kind of younger generation coming in and playing. It felt for a while that we were really moving forwards with this, but perhaps not as much as we could have done. The flip side is, there is a real gender fluidity in terms of online identity. So, we do regularly see male players who use female avatars and usernames. I'm sure the motivation behind that might be different, but I think it's multifaceted. It's not, everyone isn't just using those alt characters to avoid harassment. It might actually be from a place of empowerment. But I really think we need to dig deep and to look into why that is. People don't have to identify as themselves online, but if they're doing it because they feel threatened, then there's a problem.
I have a very different take on that, if I could share that.
Absolutely.
So, I'm coming at this like yourself as a developer. And one of the things we really see for women game developers is it's such an astonishingly male-dominated space. I'll give you an example. My co-founder at my game studio once told me a story of when she had her first animation job. And every single man in her office ran into her office and pushed their face up against the glass to kind of ogle two women playing volleyball in bikini tops in the courtyard of their office building. That's kind of the frat house norm of our industry. You see it at PAX East. You certainly see it in studios and, you know, game journalism. You certainly see it on YouTube. And there's kind of an assumption that this space is for men. You brought up male players that sometimes play as women. You might notice that frequently they're very sexualized avatars of women. So even in that particular case, it's not gender fluidity. I would call it objectifying women in a general sense. So we have to be able to, in this industry, create a space where women and, you know, where more feminine traits and perspectives can be shared without so much hostility. Ask any woman in game development, she will tell you she doesn't feel like it's always the most welcome environment to talk about, you know, issues of how women are treated in games or representation. It's just almost always hostile.
I really take that on board, Brianna. I think I'm coming from the perspective very clearly of Roblox. Our demographic, as everyone's probably aware, are very young.
Right.
Generally, our players come to us at 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And we have over 40% of our players are Roblox users are girls, which I know is quite unusual. So I think we're very proud of that, and it's something we want to hang on to and build on, and hopefully share some of that with other platforms as well. So I think you're right, and you know, absolutely, I've seen it myself with older gamers, and particularly within the industry as well. But also, I do see that positive side with the younger players. You know, on our platform, characters can be whoever they want. You don't have to be gender specific. They dress their avatars up as how they want, whatever they want to, whatever their imagination says they want to look like. So they could be animals, they could be fairies, they could be however they want to identify. And so perhaps that enables some of that being able to be whatever character and not having to make it gender specific as well.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the ways. I think if we'd had more games like Roblox at the beginning of our industry, I think we wouldn't have gotten locked into this kind of toxic cycle. I remember when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, and you would hang like Capcom posters of Captain Commando up. It was always male avatars, male players, objectified women across the entire field. What I think is so exciting about what your company is doing is, the YouTube clips around that, the culture around it does include young women. And that's very exciting to me. And I think if we'd made that decision 30 years ago, we wouldn't have so much, we have technical debt in our industry where we make decisions and have to go back and refactor code. I think we have gender debt in our industry in that same way, where the culture is so toxic at this point. We have a lot of work to do to root it out.
And I would agree. I think there's some reflections there around our society in general that would mirror your statement there. And so, and on that note, Brianna, how do we treat online harassment the same way that we treat real life harassment? And what are the discrepancies that you see there?
Well, I think most people, listening to this, they know the story about Gamergate, where I spoke up about the way women were targeted in our field. There's no good way to have a Law and Order episode made about your life. I get death threats and bricks thrown through my window to this very day. I have strangers following me around in public, taking pictures of me and emailing me messages, "I know where you live." I reported these threats to the FBI during Gamergate, as I'm sure everyone knows. They didn't take any action. They didn't take it seriously. The conclusion I've come to, and I'd love to get everyone else's opinion on this, is that the mob is not an effective way to get anything done. Women are kind of having to take these stories public and kind of relying on the media to act because law enforcement and other systems are not. You're really seeing us have to default to, things that really aren't great for issuing solutions here. So one of the reasons I am running for Congress, it's not just for this issue, but part of that is believing we do need to task areas of the FBI with prosecuting online death threats, taking issues of severe harassment seriously. And I also think we need to hold the platforms accountable for this kind of behavior. So I think it's one of these things where awareness only works if you have a course of action or a plan to do something after there's awareness. And right now we don't have that.
Yeah. And Matt, based off your work, what kind of awareness do you feel like you've been able to drive with, parents, teachers, and kids through I Can't Help?
Yeah, so much of that is really just educating on A, the reporting tools they can use, and then B, how to speak up for each other, right? We all need advocates, and especially the victim, whether offline or online bullying, it's very hard to speak up for yourself unless you have that certain character level of like, hey, I'm not going to take any, stuff from you. Let's deal with this. And for young kids, the two things to notice is A, when something happens, who speaks up? And then B, when I report it to the companies, I think Brianna has a good point. When I report this violation, whether it's kill yourself, a threat, through chat, any of the networks, like they want to know there's going to be a response. And if there's not a response, then their likelihood of actually reporting goes down, because it's like, well, I said something, we knew this was wrong. Nothing happened. So I guess it's just going to keep happening. I'm not going to do anything. So I think the more we can sort of build upon this ecosystem, right, through the reporting tools, through the resources, through how to comment on this stuff, through how to even use the reporting tools, I think the better we're all going to be. And then just the other part of that is just letting people know this stuff exists. So much of it, you talk to parents or students, like they have no idea these guys exist. They have no idea these resources exist. And really it's, how to get parents even to engage with their kids on these platforms. It's like, hey, your kid's playing this, you should play it too. Learn to play with them. I think my favorite examples are hearing about parents who have like 2 Xboxes. So either mom or dad can play with their kid on the same game. It's interesting to hear that kind of stuff.
I was so happy to hear you talk about reporting tools, though. As long as we're mentioning Xbox, in the early days of Xbox, they had humans to go through and evaluate these reports. One of the most glorious Xbox forums was explaining the bans and actually putting a video of the behavior that got people banned publicly. A few years ago, I think it was about 5 years ago, Microsoft decided to save some money and largely automate those reporting tools. And what they do now is they tend to pair problematic players up to other problematic players. It seems like a good solution, right? Until you realize that those players are both reinforcing each other's really negative behavior. So I think our industry and the cost-cutting measures we've taken on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit, on XBLA, PSN, all of this has a consequence where there's not a human investment in the tools that we need.
And so there's a stat around this that roughly 18% of people are actually using the user reporting features on any given platform. And that's pretty consistent from what we've seen at Spectrum Labs and working with dating apps and gaming companies and marketplaces and gaming, of course. But I'm curious, Laura, this is for you, what could, as a gaming company, if you were to wave a magic wand or improve safety by design for Roblox or for any other gaming company, how could you make those features more prominent and more effective for the community?
So I think, education is always key. So if there's no point having tools if people don't know how to use them, back to Matt's point. So I think, from our point of view, we're really targeting the whole community. So the players, the developers, the families, educators, the more people can encourage that reporting, the more likely people are. We need to make it as easy as possible, as obvious as possible. Give people multiple ways that they can report content. The power of the block is just awesome. And I think particularly with younger players, they actually still feel that they're doing something mean if they block someone. That kind of trying to encourage them and saying, you're not doing anything wrong by doing that is absolutely fine. I think, we have multi-layered systems on our platform, and I think that's a really good approach. There's no one thing that can make it a safer environment or a healthy community. So I think you need to look at all the different aspects. Having women involved right from the beginning, you know, it really is valuable. It's very important. We might be experiencing very different issues than male players. And if that's not considered, then those reporting tools may not be suitable. They may not be fit for purpose. So I think building those in right from the ground up. But, you know, safety has to come first. Always expect the unexpected. And also kind of really encourage, you know, we want to empower our community to use the reporting tools, to feel safe, to know what happens when they make those, you know, as Matt said, but then also what else? You know, we're doing a huge project at Roblox, many of you have probably heard about, around civility. You know, actually, yes, having those tools is fantastic, but we have a vision where we don't need those tools. You know, we want our community to be nicer, to have empathy and be kind. And because we have such a young demographic, you know, we really are hopeful that we can change some of that behaviour. And then it won't just be their behaviour on Roblox that improves, it'll be their behaviour across all platforms. You know, we need to be talking to those very young boys about what is appropriate, how to communicate, how to behave with people of all genders. And, you know, I think we have a real opportunity there.
Yeah. Laura, could I echo what you're saying right there? I think it's so key. You have to have women and other perspectives on your dev team, because if you don't, you're going to be making decisions that are going to impact it way down the line. Let me give you an example. I'm not going to tell you the name of the racing franchise, but it's one of the biggest racing games that exists. And for years, they did not have male racing driver avatars in this particular game. And as a result of this, you get like 10 years into sequels, and they finally started to introduce women drivers into this game because one woman on the dev team really put everything on the line for it, everything. And as a result of that, there was a large backlash from the male players that felt like something had been taken away. If they had had women on that dev team working on the design docs from the very beginning, yeah, they would have had that feature to begin with. When I play your game, I see something that is very consciously has all these design tools to say everyone is welcome here. Everyone is included here. And there's nothing as a woman gamer that really pushes me away. Not to say it's a feminine game, but it's an inclusive game. So I think it's just absolutely imperative that as we're designing games, we have a wider range of experiences to draw upon than the monoculture that seems to dominate game development.
And so where do you, I'll keep this on you, Brianna. Where do we draw the line on where the responsibility for gaming companies and social platforms lies around what behaviors should be allowed and not be allowed? And specifically, I'm referencing, Section 230 and how that could, any changes to that particular policy could, impact how these companies act on these types of cases.
It's such an important question, right? And one of the reasons I'm proud to run for Congress is we're playing with something extraordinarily dangerous here when we are looking at 230. And for your listeners, this is the section that basically indemnifies service providers from the content that their users create. So we have to be very, very thoughtful in how we proceed here. To tell you a very quick story, though, my friend Carrie Goldberg, she has a book out right now where someone using Tinder had a jilted ex-boyfriend, and he went through and started to create hundreds of fake profiles about his ex-boyfriend on the Tinder site. And as a result of that, he had people showing up to his house day in, day out, expecting certain things to happen when he wasn't involved with that. He got a lawyer, went to Tinder. He's like, you've got to take down these profiles. Tinder basically did nothing. Unfortunately, under 230, the way that it's currently written, that man does not have any civil recourse there. And that doesn't quite seem right to me. I think if you're highly negligent there, I do think that we should open up the door for some recourse in civil court. That said, we've got to proceed very, very thoughtfully here. Until it's more expensive for platforms to do the right thing than the wrong thing, they're going to keep choosing to do the wrong thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. Matt, any thoughts on that from your perspective?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. A few years ago, I had a unique opportunity to start a helpline here in the US with Ann Collier, and actually collaborated with Laura Higgins on that when she was in the UK. And through that, just developed a lot of relationships with different companies across platforms and boards. And admittedly, some of them were a lot easier to work with when it came to removing extreme toxic content that violated their terms of service. So, being in those conversations, I think it's really important of having these different groups, be it nonprofits, be it companies, about really understanding what the user is going through and appropriate steps the companies can take without overly legislating. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but finding that fine balance between legislation and content and responsibility and user responsibility and company responsibility to really create just more civil behavior in these online platforms. How do we hold people accountable, but then also how do we teach what is the appropriate behavior that we kind of expect in these places, right? Create that culture.
And do you think that, not just the gaming industry, but just social platforms more broadly have done a good job of self-regulating in this regard over the past several years based off what we've seen happening?
I think they're definitely trying. The biggest thing that I always stress with people is that it's new. We're figuring it out. What I have appreciated is the effort that companies are making to improve that. There's some very genuine efforts of, okay, we recognize this is wrong. We want to make it better. We're going to take these steps. And there's an absolute recognition of, we still got a ways to go. But definitely seeing some positives. For example, with Overwatch, had some very good feedback this past year. They will tell you it's not perfect, but they've seen a huge amount of increase in trust in the platform. They've seen a huge amount of increase in the amount of positive behavior, something like 40%, if I remember correctly. Like, those are good numbers and it's a step in the right direction. But I know in speaking with them, it's like, we're making improvement. We still have steps we have to take. So those are kind of things where it's, coming to these trust and safety meetings, having the kind of conversations we're having here and bringing all the stakeholders to the table. It is definitely a step in the right direction, a recognition of we really want to make this better.
And Laura, how do you think Roblox's policies and community guidelines have evolved over the past few years to support that?
We never stop is the first thing. I think, just picking up on the point about self-regulation, I think, there's so much discussion globally at the moment about regulation. In New Zealand, we have the Harmful Digital Communications Act. In Australia, they've tightened up the regulations over there and put in the Safety Commissioner. In the UK, we have the discussions around online harms and potentially having a regulator here. I think that it's inevitable. I think for some organisations it could be really helpful. We know that there are certain platforms, particularly chat apps, which are really popular within the gaming community. It's the Wild West sometimes. And I don't think they can be trusted to manage it appropriately. So I think in some ways that's kind of a positive thing. So that will at least make it very clear what is expected of platforms. In terms of us, we're ever evolving. We've often joked that even though we've been around for a long time, we were kind of still a startup. We were a baby and just growing organically. And with that has grown the expertise and the knowledge. But we're very responsive. Like any platform, you cannot say you're 100% safe, nothing will ever go wrong. And it is that unexpected, but it's about how you learn from that, how you adapt very quickly. And make sure that your policies are really robust. We have grown our safety team hugely. We have 24/7 support around the world, multiple language support, over 800 people reviewing that content, because actually Brianna raised this beautifully. We need humans to moderate. You need to understand the context. You need to be able to make appropriate decisions. And you will always need humans to do that. And you need really good tech as well. And that combination, I think, is what's really important. Policy, so for us as well, is about consulting with others. As Matt said, we've worked together on many projects over the years. In my previous role, I was with the UK Safer Internet Centre, where I oversaw image-based abuse helpline and the helpline for schools. And so we've been seeing these issues for a very long time. And actually, I was able to bring that knowledge and previous experience to Roblox. We work with partners all over the world. In around 22 countries, we're working with safety partners, and we're listening to them because that's the best way for us to make sure that the policies we have are really fit for purpose.
And Brianna, for you, similar question there. Gamergate was several years ago. Has anything changed? Has anything worked? What policies or technologies have improved or worsened this particular situation around protecting underrepresented groups online?
Justin, I'm going to have to get real with you here. I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times just about 3 weeks ago. Almost nothing changed after Gamergate in our industry. We certainly had male developers behind the scenes that made a big show about, being allies. But the truth is, I can't point to a policy that changed overall. I can't point to numbers that would indicate that women are staying in the game industry any longer. We leave at a rate 4 times that of what men do. I can't point to, anything at all that's fundamentally changed. I want to tell you a story of 2 companies. Matt, you brought up Overwatch. And I want to compare this to Roblox. Overwatch came out a few years ago, and they really wanted to launch headfirst into the esports space. And Blizzard put a ton of money behind recruiting pro players, even right here in Boston. Our professional Overwatch team is called Boston Uprising. There's a story I could tell of behind the scenes about the partners they chose to work with in recruiting players and hiring different players. And for the first year or so of this professional Overwatch league, they had 0 women, no women, absolutely no women. Out of every single Overwatch player in the world, of which there's a huge woman player base, they hired 0 women. And that was because of the people that they hired to initiate that. If you compare that to something like Roblox, if I go to the YouTube gaming section and I look at trending, look at who is making content for the public with Roblox. It's generally younger girls that make some hilarious videos. Laura, I don't know if that's because you did a specific outreach to them, but it's clear that you're giving them the tools that they need to make engaging content. So I think there is a responsibility side on the industry to think much more critically about what we do with public-facing content. The other part of that I think is more important, frankly, is law enforcement. If you're telling a woman gamer you intend to rape her, that is a crime. If you're threatening to murder someone in PSN or on Xbox Live, that's a crime. And I do think that law enforcement has failed in prosecuting these kinds of high-level cases. There's not going to be anything that changes materially until people see that there are consequences for their actions. The reason I don't drive too fast in my town is because I got speeding tickets when I was very young. Similarly, we need to see some high-level cases of people being prosecuted for credible threats, death threats, because until that happens, people are just going to think it's frankly a game.
So that I totally agree. I think that's the stick approach. On the carrot side, there's a question from the audience here from Robert Hornbeck around ideas and thoughts on how we as developers can empower allies in the community who may be witnessing the bullying. Do you have any thoughts on that specifically?
Yes, definitely. I cannot tell you how many times over the last few years there's been a high-profile woman targeted in our field, and she's called me up and taken a call at 3 a.m. To talk to her. And we've put together teams of people to basically watch their Twitter and report the death threats when they come in. So there's a very personal level of being a friend to people like that and being there. You'll be doing them a favor they will appreciate for the rest of their life. What we need on the dev side is men to do more to be allies as we're developing these platforms. I want to tell you a story about an engineering meeting I had early in my career. We were making some server decisions, and I got talked over in a meeting, and my boss looked at the man that spoke over me. He goes, "Hold on, Brianna's not finished speaking. Can you please finish your thought?" That's the kind of concrete ally action that you just don't know how much it means to your women colleagues. So help us battle that kind of unconscious sexism on our teams. Talk to your friends when they get out of line or they do something that might harm someone in ways you haven't thought about. We really need those kinds of concrete actions.
I would take that from a Roblox point of view, that's actually one of the things that we see regularly is this kind of self-regulation on the platform amongst players. So they will regularly call each other out and kind of say, that was a really mean thing to say, that person didn't do anything to you. And I think the more we can encourage that kind of in-game activism as well as within the dev community, I think it's a really positive thing. So yeah, all for that.
Another question from the audience on a slightly related, a different topic from Rafa Ross is around women gamers and when they're thrust to basically prominence within a gaming community. How do we, as a community, basically promote that without exposing them to different types of toxicity and share their story without necessarily putting them in a spotlight that they may not really want to be in?
You can't. I just gotta be straight with you. I know a lot of women that look at these stories about what happens to high-level women that compete or gain prominence on a platform, and the backlash is inevitable right now. I would never critique someone that chose to not be in that limelight because there will be a cost they have to pay. That is a consequence of the failed culture, frankly, in our field. There's no magic bullet to stop that. All we can do is try to stop it from happening to women that are prominent and hope that we can start changing this culture.
Yeah, I would pick up on that as well. A couple of years ago, I was on the board of the Reclaim the Internet campaign that was run by the UK government. And there were some very prominent British female MPs on there, along with tech representatives. And we had a fantastic first meeting. We were really passionate about what we wanted to do and the campaigns we were targeting. And they closed the meeting by saying, we think you're all very brave. You do know that by being part of this campaign that you are going to receive abuse. How depressing is that, that's the starting point of a campaign? Brace yourself, you're going to get loads of abuse because you put your head above the parapet. And I agree, sadly, things have not moved as fast as they should. It's reflective of offline life as well, though. We still have huge issues around gender inequalities in workplace and all of those sorts of things. But we do need to keep shouting it out. We need to call it out. We need to be really proactive in dealing with it. And as I say, just changing that representation, more power to the people, really.
And what do you think, Laura, the biggest hurdle is for improving that type of civility when so much negativity is happening offline? And this is related to a question that one of our audience members had as well.
So I guess the difficult area that we're always looking to how we tackle is the teenage age group. Is always going to be difficult. When we're working with young kids, generally they're nice, they're very compliant, you can teach them in very gentle ways, and they just want to have fun. If those kind of beliefs and behaviors are already embedded, and you have that kind of whole bro code that goes on, it's really hard to change those behaviors. So, we're looking at everything from, it can't all just be stick. That's one thing, because actually at that age, they're going out of their way to break the rules. They think it's funny when they get banned off platforms. It's not a deterrent at all. Yes, it's really important that we do it, but we need to try to change the ethos and change the culture that they're in. So encouraging the good behavior, rewarding the good behavior is, it sounds silly, but actually they do quite appreciate it. As I say, regularly calling it out, peer-to-peer. Brianna, fantastic point about the YouTubers. I'm an older person in my 40s, and as much as I might have a history of working in safeguarding, that is not going to appeal to a 16-year-old gamer lad. Actually having influencers, whether gaming specific or more broadly people from popular culture, calling this out and going, do you know what, that's not okay, that's not actually cool, that's not who you want to be. Those sorts of things do start to chip away at it. It is really difficult as well in terms of these closed room cultures. So as I say, things like private servers where this stuff just gets worse and worse and worse because there's nobody stopping it, there's nobody calling it out. Yeah. It's fantastic when somebody does, but they then become themselves and they're excluded from those conversations. So about how we really get into those difficult spaces, and it needs to be quite a tough approach, I think.
Yeah.
I'm really anti name and shame. Clearly, working with people who've been victims of doxing and sexual image based abuse, I'm not encouraging that kind of name and shame. But actually, we've had cases like here in the UK where there was some group chats went between some students in one of our local universities here, and they were laughing and joking about raping students.
Yeah.
One of them was brave enough to share those messages with the media, and some of them lost one of them had a placement as a lawyer, and he lost the job because of it, which is great. But yeah, what goes on behind those closed doors is sometimes quite worrying, and we really need to call it out.
Laura, can I just say something really quick on that? So you're talking about private servers and how that bleeds over into the real world sometimes. Recently, you mentioned New Zealand. You had the Christchurch shooting there. Absolutely abhorrent, terrible, like gut-wrenching to see that. That was planned and broadcast on 4chan. 4chan directly was founded and popularized during Gamergate, where basically they decided to make their own private server to say anything, do anything. It was a very gamer-centric culture. And then you saw those kinds of consequences bleed over into the real world with one of the worst mass shootings in history. So I just want to say the stakes here are very, very high. It's not just someone having a bad experience in a game or a loss of a profit. Like, we're really talking about when we fail at our jobs fundamentally as game developers, you can literally lead to radicalizing young people, and people can be hurt very badly. So I think we need to realize that this isn't like some separation between online life and real life. The stakes here could not be higher.
Absolutely, I agree with you, Brianna. There was, I'm not sure whether people have seen it, but it's worth looking at. There's a parenting writer called Joanna Schroeder, and she wrote a thread that went really viral on Twitter a few weeks ago, exactly on this topic, where, she has a great relationship with her kids and she's pretty tech savvy, but she just noticed this change in the kind of dialogue that her sons and their friends, their peers, were having. And she just sort of realized that this is a very gentle form of radicalization that's happening, where they're desensitizing them, drip feeding content, and then, talking about the freedom of speech and, these snowflakes are trying to stop stop you from being able to talk how you want to and behave how you want to, until you have these very extreme behaving young people who are really malleable for poor intention from other people. It is a form of grooming. But because it's kind of in that bro code and it's, jokey and it's memes and it's those sorts of things, they really have no idea that it's happening. It's great that we're talking about it, but we've got a really long way to go. And absolutely, it sounds really trivial, but actually that's where it starts. And things like shootings and discussing it on 4chan is where it ends.
No, and just kind of adding to that, I mean, we have so many students, I think, who are really kind of caught in the middle where their parents just have no clue. And a lot of them, honestly, the kids that we talk to, be it particularly middle school and high school, like they really want to do the right thing. They really want to do something that's good, but often they just really don't know how. And so even doing, back to an earlier point, but I think addressing some of this, I think you're both spot on in that there's no more offline or online, there's just life. And, for these kids, knowing how to respond to these, awkward, in their case, because it's new, social situations, like, when someone says this, like, says, go kill yourself, like, what do I say? Like, I don't know. I've never had to respond to this before. Yeah. And if they don't have that, kind of very strong, true purpose, moral character, they may not feel confident enough to say something directly online in a public forum because they're not there yet. I think the other piece to that, to speak to what you just said, Laura, is parents modeling the behavior, particularly for their kids, whether it is through games, whether it is through these conversations. That need for media literacy, digital literacy is so huge, because they can sort of see this hopefully and start to break it down and understand, like, okay, what does a person really mean through this message? And even as schools, I think we can do more to help students understand, okay, when you see this, is this really an argument about free speech or someone really trying to push an agenda? And understanding, the context and the content that's behind it and what that person is really trying to get out and make happen at the end of the day, from an ethical standpoint, like what is the right and wrong we're trying to accomplish here? And getting them to think and process that.
Matt, I do have to push back just a little bit on what you just said. I feel like I've sat in so many game dev meetings or engineering meetings, and our industry just pushes everything back on the parents. Like, if you don't like the violence of GTA, just don't let your kids play that game. And I think as an industry, I really think of it like, there's a story in the United States about a hog farm that was prosecuted by the EPA because they were just dumping all of the pig waste in a stream, and it was poisoning a nearby town. And I kind of think that's the way the game industry behaves sometimes. Like we create this thing that's creating problems for parents and the behavior of their children. And it's a mess we've created because we didn't design it the right way. We didn't design correct enforcement tools or anti-harassment tools, and we're just passing it over to the parents. Here in this country, I've been very happy to see things like the ESRB. It's taken that step. We self-rate games, and we've built tools into the consoles to let parents say, you know what, my 8-year-old does not need to be playing Grand Theft Auto. But at the same time, I think we have fundamentally failed to teach parents how to use those tools. And I think there's a culture of condescension in the game industry. So I think until we have more accountability, I feel like putting it off on parents, I think it's a cop-out for the decisions our industry is making.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that, because it's, being in education, we get the same thing, right? From the school standpoint, oh, it's the parents need to do this. From a parent standpoint, oh, the schools need to do this. And when something bad happens, I'm amazed at the level of finger pointing that just, it's not about, oh, we solved this, kids are safe. It's finger pointing and who's at fault. And it really is all of us. It's the companies, it's parents, it's families, it's everyone kind of holding each other accountable and saying, hey, we need these better tools. Hey, we want to be more informed. Across the board, I think it's a little bit of everybody, really doing the right thing that needs to happen.
I would jump in and say, actually, that's kind of where I am. I sit in the middle because I agree with both sides, really. We are really doing a lot of work with parents because they need it. And it's not because we're blaming them, but we just want to make sure that we're making it as obvious as possible. We understand how busy parents are. Also, we want to try and get parents on board with gaming generally. They kind of seem so very scared of talking about it. I'm sure that conversations in the media, there's an awful lot of scaremongering, and it terrifies parents. So rather than trying to find out, they run away from it. And we're kind of going, it's not even that you have to be an expert about gaming, but actually just get your kid to show you what they do and have a go, because it's actually fun. And if that's where they're playing and they don't want to play a board game of Monopoly with you, maybe you should go and play with them online, So some of those conversations and doing it together is good. I agree, though, accountability of companies is really important. There's so much exciting collaboration going on. Big shout out Fair Play Alliance. We love you guys. And we have amazing conversations with other gaming companies about how we can do better, how we can share best practice, real collaboration. I think the days of, sensitive corporate information, we are moving past that. We have realized we all have to work together to make things better. As I say, my community are the same community that are on Minecraft and Fortnite and all the other platforms. So we have to work together to keep them safe. So, but yeah, I think, the idea of it takes all of us is the right way. And yeah, back to your point, Brianna, about law enforcement, that's a real key one as well. We have a working group here in the UK where many gaming companies work directly with the police and keep them up to speed on things we're seeing, concerns on the platform and vice versa. But I don't think that's happening in the US, and that really needs to.
I agree. That's a lot of why I'm running for Congress.
And Brianna, on that note, in this discussion made me think of something. What are some other common misconceptions that people have? And I'm specifically, the one that comes to mind for me, and I would assume is a big elephant in the room, is the intersection of gun violence and video games in the spotlight that seems to come about or get shown on the video game industry every couple of years or so when stuff like this happens. What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks for asking that, Justin. It's a really critical question. So I want to, before I say this, I want to stress this is still being studied, but I can certainly tell you a bit about what the preliminary scientific studies have found regarding what a very specific kind of gaming can do to your children. I'm not talking about Roblox. I'm talking about Call of Duty, Doom, first-person shooter culture. So it is true that there is no direct link between mass violence and playing video games. But there are different things that science has shown that playing video games can do to your children. If you have a diet of very violent video games, one of the things it does is it slows your social skills. It doesn't mean you can't develop those later in life, but early science does seem to indicate that playing those kinds of games slows your social development. More frighteningly to me, playing hyper-violent games can slow and stunt your growth of empathy for other people. So I think, to me, the solution is not to say, oh, we're going to ban X kind of game. That would just be a terrible decision. But I do think the answer is to, rather than our industry constantly shipping one kind of product, Battlefield / Call of Duty / Doom / first person shooter of the week, I think that we need to be giving a greater variety of gameplay to people. I can tell you, as a woman gamer, I've played many, many, many violent games, and I love them. But my favorite kind of game are story-based experiences like Mass Effect. And I think our industry has really painted itself into a corner with an innovation problem. We really, because there's one kind of person steering the ship consistently in the video game industry, we tend to put out one very, 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 very specific kind of product. And it's just not exciting for me anymore. I've found myself more bored today at the product we are shipping than I ever have been in my entire life.
Thank you for answering that question.
Yeah.
Brianna. Laura, do you have any thoughts on that particular topic?
Interesting, and I think that is one of the joyful things of Roblox. We don't refer to the experiences on the platform as games. We refer to them as experiences, because not all of them are that typical shooter, male-oriented. The experiences we have, some are more typical things you might assume girls would want to play. So the adopt me, have cute fluffy pets, those sorts of things, the nurturing type games. Some of them are just really picturesque, let's go and have a look at a beautiful landscape. And some of them are shoot 'em ups. But actually the people developing those games are probably not the people you think would be. And also the people playing those games are probably not the ones you think would be. So really providing that very broad and diverse range. And as I say, the beautiful thing is this is not us that have come up with that. It's our young developers. Everything on our platform is made by young developers themselves. Their imagination is amazing. So we're very keen to kind of keep encouraging them to take that with them. They are already starting to open their own studios and develop their own games. And we just want to keep that mindfulness about that. Think broad, think, you want this to appeal to everybody, not just that one single market. I mean, the good thing is, despite this conversation, women are still gaming. Women are still coming into gaming, even at a young age. And I think if we can make it a nicer place for them, that number will keep increasing, and we might finally start to see that equality that you were talking about, Brianna.
And that's a good segue, I think, into the last question that I have for the panel, which is if you could say one thing to a female gamer or any individual that feels the need to obfuscate their identity and change it because of harassment in order to avoid that, or even to a developer that's thinking about building in these tools, if you want to take that approach, what's the one thing that you would say to them?
Justin, my message for them would be this. And I want that young girl gamer to really hear me on this. You have sisters that are putting everything on the line for you in this field. You don't see it from where you are, but behind the scenes, there are women every day in this industry. They're standing up to their male development teams and saying, we've got to make this less brazenly offensive. we're going to include a woman PC here. We're going to, hey, we're hiring a new engineer for our company. We need to bring in some women for this particular role. Hey, we're playtesting. Our entire playtesting cohort is nothing but 20-something white dudes. We've got to bring in a wider perspective. My message to you is you have no idea how hard your sisters are working behind the scenes to make this better for you. So if you follow your dreams, if you push past all this horror and this nonsense that you are dealing with, you are going to find yourself in an amazing artistic field with the best friends you've ever had that will have your back all day, every day.
Well said. Laura?
That was beautiful. Thanks, Brianna. I think for me, I'm going to focus on the young girls coming onto our platform and playing. And my message is, you belong here. You know, this is a safe space. You are part of the community and you have every right to be here and be respected as much as anyone else.
And Matt, you see these emotional stories all the time with your work. What would be your message and who would it be to?
If I can copy and paste Brianna's message, that would be amazing. No, honestly, I love hearing this because for me, it's, you know, there's students and everyone else that we work with. But, you know, even my own daughter, who's now 9, has shown a huge interest in this field. And as she starts to get into gaming and find that interest, I mean, she came up out of nowhere. I've learned not to push my hobbies on my kids, and hashtag good parenting. But the exposing her to that, she just really has a huge interest in science and gaming and coding, and has found just a rudimentary interest there. So as she enters this world, I really want this to be a good space for her and her friends and finding a future here if that's truly her passion. And to have a space where she can be accepted for her skills and the diversity that she brings to the table and just the learning that she can have and hopefully someday mentors. That's what I get really excited about because I know there's many others just like her really looking to have the same experience and the same impact on this industry.
Well said as well. Well, that's our time for today. Thank you guys for today's discussion. And time is just so precious for all of us, and for you all to spend an hour sharing your insights and experiences on this topic is, I think, super informative and helpful. So thanks again for your time. For those listening in, feel free to submit additional questions and we'll follow up via email. Also, check out the Fair Play Alliance's website regularly for upcoming events and webinars, as well as to learn more about how you can also get involved with this particular organization and many other important topics related to gaming. There were a couple questions related to resources to help developers and where people could go and just learn more about trust and safety and protecting underrepresented groups online. So we'll make sure to share some content around that as well. Thanks again for your time today, guys.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you for having us on.